Allora, io parlo in inglese perché mi ricerco in inglese, ma dopo, se volete, anche possiamo fare un discorso in italiano. Eccoci qua. Sì, buongiorno a tutti. I'm really pleased to be here because, yes, we need to define the future based on the learnings that we have from the past. But the thing is, we have to be critical. We cannot just change things for the sake of changing something. We have to challenge the underlying business conditions. And my research that I will summarize for the last 14 years will give us some ideas about what we have to learn from our mistakes to make sure the future will be built based on something real. And this is my keyword. I'm here to ask you to join me for an action. But this action must be built with awareness, criticality, transparency, inclusion, openness, and novelty. Things are rough. This moment is really crucial. Legislations are coming. There's chaos. There are crises, so climate crisis, social crisis, and everything. So that's why we have to wake up. And my pledge to you, I will help you wake up based on everything that we have seen in this industry. But before and foremost, who am I? And this is a LinkedIn if you want. We can get LinkedIn. And my name is Hakan. I am an associate professor at Cardiff University in Galles in the beautiful UK. But at the same time, I'm having multiple positions. I am a visiting scholar in Politecnico di Milano and University College Dublin. But also, I'm a critical and activist professor. So I am mobilizing with activists, and we try to create movements. And I am involved with Union of Concerned Researchers in Fashion and Remake. If you want to take a look at UCRF and Remake, you are more than welcome. We try to mobilize collective action. And before this, I was involved, and actually this action research is still ongoing. This is a project awarded by the European Union and also recognized by the United Nations on just transition. We really try to integrate social justice into climate action in fashion supply chains. And since 2020, Fresh, our project is ongoing. And before that, throughout my postdoc career, I was involved with projects with the United Nations and Politecnico, which I did a double degree PhD with University Politecnico de Madrid, Spain, and Italy. And before that, my proper background is carbon footprint and decarbonization. So I am an environmental engineer by default, and I try to integrate sustainability in fashion supply chains from the social justice angle. And these are some of the recognitions. I am here to really promote science. I am not having any business agenda. I am here to tell you the truth coming from my scientific research. And these are some of the recognitions that I am having from the multiple industry, also academic institutions. This is a picture which I wanted to showcase. What do you see in this picture? There are centuries, there are years, and there's always a couple. Sorry for the lack of inclusion, just white people, I'm aware. We have to be more inclusive. But for the sake of the depiction, what we see here is actually a trend line and longitudinal picture over the last centuries. One thing remains the same, clothing. We always need to cover ourselves, and clothing will always be the essential lifesaver for us to survive. So trends can change, as you see colors, fabrics. The fashion changes, style changes, but clothing will always remain. Having said that, I often realize people really underestimate fashion. Actually, fashion is a really strong industry. And believe it or not, from pharmaceuticals to food to many other sectors, fashion is followed by almost everyone. What happens in this industry is actually setting trends for many others. So how is it possible then, we as a collective that are so proud of having a longitudinal project around fame and exposure are doing so bad for sustainability? So things should change, but first, let's remember why fashion is important and why people are taking us even inspirationally seriously. Do you remember this picture? This was February 2002, actually February 2000, February 23rd. Jennifer Lopez, you know who she is, a global superstar. She walked on the Grammy red carpet. I remember I was 14, I was in Istanbul. In those years, internet wasn't this rife. We were always trying to find images. She stepped onto the red carpet, and of course, we didn't know, but apparently something happened, which is called breaking the internet. And everybody was looking for this dress, and they kept searching for Versace, green dress, Jennifer. Do you know what happened? Actually, Google realized the interest, and Google realized they didn't have any service to cater to people looking for images. So that famous Google Images function was actually established after Versace. So this was the power of a dress worn by an important person, and then innovation was initiated thanks to the power of fashion. Moving forward, this is Alexia Cortez, a congressman from United States. She is brilliant to give political messages through clothing. And this was one of the most important fashion nights in the world, Met Gala, the first Monday in May. And she wore this dress, Taxi Rich. So again, fashion was used for a very important political messaging. Another important moment, an American superstar and singer-songwriter Lizzo, when she was receiving her Achievement Award, she wore this dress to help Americans wake up. Vote. Speaking of which, we need to cover ourselves with this vote because 2 weeks' time, something will happen in America, so let's cross the fingers that something good will happen. And last but not least, my favorite. Kate Blanchett this year, she wore this dress in Cannes. And this year, Cannes was strictly unpolitical, and everything was forbidden, not to give any political messages in today's world. And she stepped onto the red carpet without saying anything. She just unveiled the tail of her dress. And if you look at the colors, you understand what she was trying to say. So, fashion is important. Luxury is always inspirational. So let's dig into some numbers. This is just luxury specific. Because what happens in this context is always followed by the others, including fast fashion and ultra fast fashion, but numbers are skyrocketing. Even though we are having a crisis, luxury is growing, meaning products, experiences, and all those things that we see coming from luxury industry will increase. If you look at the product categories, actually accessories, and interestingly, beauty is on the rise, and these are some of the numbers representing the market size of luxury. Moving forward, what is interesting, young consumers that are changing are more into experiences. So also the era of just putting something for the sake of putting something is over. People also want to see experiences. Why am I showing all these slides? Because what happens in this context, which is luxury, will be cut and pasted to fast fashion and other segments. And last but not least, for the first time we are seeing something. People now want to go to the stores. Luxury is also having this weird moment in which they really try to understand how to provide experiences to the consumers. Consumers will be in the stores to receive the experience, but as you see, actually now the biggest channel is retail and owned, operated stores. What does it mean? Now, also conscious consumers will go to the stores. What does it mean? Consumers might have questions about difficult things, including sustainability. So time to wake up. Luxury, fashion, everyone else needs to be aware and get prepared because consumers are coming to ask questions. This is one of my favorite images from my PhD because I love history, political history, and history of art, and also fashion history. But everything happened with, of course, with the birth of haute couture, especially Second World War. And haute couture was a very inspirational moment to empower women and also to give businesses to so many couturiers and haute couture experts. But of course, money is sweet, and people saw opportunities, and we actually stepped into the category of ready-to-wear, and we started creating stores, multiple collections, so we extended our offerings. Luxury that was bespoke and really individual to an individual have become something to cater to multiple people. So it actually, in the 80s, we saw something quite dangerous. Fashion has become a commodity from the 80s. And there was a really famous saying, until the 80s, fashion was about to be an inspiration. It was about dreams, but in the 80s, some businessmen that wanted to capture this market said something so famously arrogant. They said, we will do fashion to sell. We will not do fashion to aspire. And that person was actually the CEO of LVMH. And they really wanted to capture the market size and they wanted to grow financially. That's fine, but it didn't stop there. Other people also saw the opportunity. Luxury, until the 90s, has been something so untouchable and unattainable for a group of people. But of course, fast fashion saw the opportunity and they wanted to democratize luxury. So from absolute luxury to accessible luxury, we stepped into the realm of fast fashion. And now we talk about more than 24 collections a year. And also what happens in fast fashion, which is technically following the trends set by luxury, is now perpetuated with something called AI. Here, a wake-up call for all of us. Technology is important. It is a very, very important tool, but it is a tool. If we don't use technology with good intentions and with the good purpose, nothing will change. If you look at Shein example, they are using AI and nothing to say. They have really revolutionized the fashion production by using AI. They don't create warehouses. They don't create stocks. Everything is on-demand production. But the purpose is economic financial growth. And they keep producing millions of items every single day. So my wake-up call is technology is something important, but it is a tool. If we don't use it with ethics and good behavior, nothing actually will change. We will just perpetuate the problem. And these are some of my favorite books from Dana Thomas. She's a really great author. I will leave this slide with you, so you might actually take a look at this trilogy. The first book was about deluxe, how luxury lost its luster. What does it mean? Why luxury lost its identity? Why growing financially was so sweet? We actually betrayed the legacy of luxury, which was about creating quality items that will last long and that will be cherished for generations. The first book was about how luxury business model was betrayed. And the second book of this trilogy was about creative resources. In fashion, we don't talk about creative resources enough. We talk about ecology, we talk about social resources, but also creative resources are important and emotional resources. And this book was about two legendary designers, John Galliano and Alexander McQueen, and how this business model destroyed two brilliant, intelligent designers. And then the third book of this trilogy is about ecological collapse of fashion. So how this business model has betrayed its own values, resulting in emotional and ecological collapse. Moving forward, here, and all my research, I dedicate my research to garment workers. Most of the time, this industry don't celebrate the people making garments, and I feel so emotional about the garment workers because fashion is one of the only few industries that is so powerful because of the labor force. But we don't celebrate, we even don't respect labor. We are so detached emotionally. That's why my research is dedicated especially to these two women. This is June Marshall from Scotland, and this is Günay Karaosman from Istanbul. She's my mother, and she is Donna's mother. Donna is my colleague and my mentor and one of my best friends that we work together. So our mothers were garment workers. We were raised in households that were part of fashion supply chains. So if you really want to understand why social justice must be integrated into fashion, then we can go for a drink and I will give you lived experiences to explain why garments and garment workers have always been marginalized and why Fashion for Future should integrate workers to the front line and why workers must be centered. This is the context. And now let's talk about some big problems and some grand challenges. From now on, my pledge to you, we really have to understand why fashion should change. Of course, we keep seeing regulations, legislations, but there are really big problems such as climate change. Fashion is also really important because raw materials come from the soil. But everything happens in terms of climate, is creating consequences for the business. And fashion has to remember one thing. Our survival depends on the soil and raw materials. If we really don't understand how we should integrate ourselves at that level, then we have a problem. From Kashmir to leather, everything comes from the earth. And we have to be conscious. And climate change is real. Every single day, actually, the new records are being broken. But make no mistake, every problem that we see from ecological sustainability to wars are becoming a supply chain problem. Meaning, actually, because of globally dispersed supply chains, now we are in a world and we are connected. Products, materials, labor force, we are all in the system together. But supply chains are really important, but still, supply chain as a concept hasn't been understood. Especially fashion people, they approach supply chain as a concept that is static. But actually, supply chains are not static entities. They are dynamic, social, ecological ecosystems. If we don't really understand the importance of supply chain, then the crisis that we will see from now on will just destroy us. We have to make sure we understand the importance of supply chain management, because every problem that you are seeing from Middle East to sustainability to climate change will become a supply chain problem. And these are some of the consequences. But of course, two things, we cannot separate climate justice from climate change, meaning we cannot separate long-term consequences of climate change from time-sensitive actions. Here I will give two examples. Number one, climate change is real. We have to take actions. But oftentimes, we frame those actions around technology. I am not against technology, but technology is a very easy tool to manipulate. And if we don't do this properly, we create long-term consequences. And I will step into just transition in a minute. But what I'm trying to accentuate, we cannot avoid unintentional consequences, because there will always be a long-term societal challenge. Whatever we do today here will create a condition for tomorrow. We have to plan these things with a long-term planning mindset. If we don't integrate this, it will collapse. And let's remember what Einstein used to say. We cannot change anything with the same mindset that have actually created these problems in the first place. So time to actually shift a little bit our mindset. And also fashion is a really interesting industry. There have been so many other industries that actually went through these transitions. So how is it possible that this industry that is really important, big and influential, doesn't understand how change can happen? Let's try to understand how we can actually create a picture that will be guilt-free in terms of environmental and social consequences. But let's be honest and let's be realistic. Fashion is great, tools are wonderful, perfect, but let's discuss the underlying business conditions. These are some of the numbers that we are seeing in the world for garment production. These are global fiber production numbers, meaning we keep producing. We keep churning out goods from luxury to fast fashion. From now on, I am not separating luxury from fast fashion because I talk about the system. In the system, we have multiple segments: luxury, fast fashion, ultra fast fashion, and we are using fibers. Here, we are having natural fibers, and we are having man-made fibers. Look at the numbers. Make no mistake. If you look at the fiber production in the world, numbers are skyrocketing. And where do these fibers go? Into fabric and into product. But if you look at the numbers, 71% of the global fiber production is coming from synthetics, meaning it comes from polyester and petroleum-based other materials. So underlying business condition is we have to be conscious about what we are doing before creating solutions for sustainability. Here, the main problem is, I saw this with my own eyes, 1 kilo of polyester, raw polyester fiber is 1 ton is just $1 cheaper than cotton. But if you look at the scale, if you look at the production numbers, this is how many people make so much money But let's be honest about the problems that we are facing. If we don't talk about the volumes and production numbers, we cannot be serious about climate change and sustainability. Luxury is really important, and also fashion must realize this is a very important industry where we have a power imbalance. This is one of my papers, and you will see the reference in a minute. We have created with our research, based on all the learnings that we got from fashion supply chains, a very interesting paradox. Power independence and power dependence. Fashion is a really important industry, but if you look at this, knowledge is not at the brand level. Excuse me, but I will not sugarcoat anything. Knowledge is coming from the supply chains, especially lower tiers, farmers, workers, lower tiers. They do the materials, they do the production, they do everything for the brands to be able to sell the garments and other items. Knowledge is actually located at the supply chain, but this is where financial power is located. And this actually mismatch is a big problem. Power and financial resources are really significantly positioned on top, but knowledge is at the bottom. So my question to you, how can we then talk about decarbonization without having conversations with the suppliers and with lower tiers? These people have the knowledge, and these people have the money. So our task is to build this bridge to make sure resources are shared financially, technically, but also emotionally. Our task for the Fashion for Future is to make sure this bridge is created and the future becomes something much more just and equitable for everybody involved. I will check the time. Yes, we are good. And I wanted to give you some more evidence from my research. When I do research, I am in the field and I speak with the manufacturers, and this is my favorite thing to do. And I'm so lucky because this is my work, but I really enjoy what I do, and then at the end I get paid, which is great. But I speak with the people, and the lived experiences and ideas that I'm hearing from these people are just wonderful. But the problem is oftentimes we don't give the microphone to the individuals, and this is really something that bothers me. So I will give you some examples, but in this research on just transition, I was in Turkey, and I'm from Turkey, but I didn't go to Turkey because I was Turkish. But Turkey is a vertical country like Italy. So we grow raw materials, and then it goes until final consumers. So these are the suppliers, and what does it mean? Tier 1 is finished garment manufacturers. They do cut and sew operations with lots of workers, but also we have additional outsourced cut and sew factories, subcontractors, because production volumes are so big. Actually, Tier 1 manufacturers give lots of orders to their own subcontractors, and this is how we get a little bit confused with the supply chain visibility. And then below, we have fabric, and then yarn, etc. So circularity doesn't happen at the moment. We are still not talking about circular fashion supply chains. We try to shoehorn circularity into a system which is linear. It can happen, but we have to be really conscious about the systemic conditions, and this is what we see in the moment in the fashion industry. This is a really linear system, and we have some problems. And this is another paper which I want you to read, but also we are going to give some implications to the researchers moving forward, because also in academia, we need to wake up. There are things also from our perspective that must be challenged. But let's briefly discuss. The first point is, if we want to build the future of fashion, we have to realize one thing. Fashion is driven by economic growth. People want to grow and they want to make profits. The problem is this profit-making mindset comes with cost reduction purposes. Supply chains in the fashion context are driven by cost reduction strategies, luxury included. I am seeing negotiations in which suppliers are shrunk for even 1 cent. Luxury, fast fashion, the same mentality. Supply chains are driven by cost reduction purposes, but then the problem is this system creates paradoxical tensions. What does it mean? I saw this again in my research. Some companies are asking for water reduction, but the same company is asking a design that requires additional chemicals. And then to wash those chemicals, you have to use additional water. So that system is quite paradoxical, which shows us there is no conversation even at the brand level. So these conversations must start internally and externally. But that lack of conversation between purchasing, design, and operations, we are in the system which is driven by paradoxical requirements. And then the consequences is, we have created this system, and this is actually mostly about fast fashion. They love standardizing tools, they love standardizing performance systems, but at the end, one thing you have to remember, things are context specific. Your problem is your problem. I can help you, but I have to understand what you are dealing with. And the same for you. But I cannot come up with one-size-fits-all solutions that will work for all of you. Currently, the fashion is doing this. And for technology, if we do the tools with this mentality, it will create long-term consequences that will not be good. That's why we have to be really careful about the systemic conditions. Standardized tools don't work. These are easy solutions, but if we want to do things long-term, we have to think differently. Context matters. And at the end, if you look at individuals, so we have 3 levels. What happens at the supply chain level has cascaded pressure at individual organizations, but also at individuals that work in the fashion sector. And even journalists loved this depiction because so far, very few people talk about psychological consequences of fashion. So psychologically, this is an industry that creates pressure for the workers, for the managers, for everyone involved. To change this, we have to actually be really honest about the problems at hand. And this is a luxury supply chain. So when I actually compare fast fashion and luxury, the situation is not that different. The only advantage with luxury, supply chains are a little bit shorter. And if we have a vertical supply chain, it is easier to integrate. But in this case, what I wanted to show you is what is really vital is the mindset of the brand. And this, another paper that is published on here. Before actually we jump into this, my pledge to the academics, we also have to be really, how many of us are academics here? Perfect, okay, very few. But for us also, we have to be clever about the theories and the methods, but we can discuss this later. So I see the audience is mostly practice-based. So in this supply chain example, which is about actually made in Italy, and we were looking at some luxury products and luxury supply chains and luxury brands and suppliers, everything else. I realized one thing, actually, it's all contingent on the mindset of the company. In Italy, something happens, which is ignorance, and somehow even arrogance. Some brands are really detached emotionally, and if they don't understand that their survival is dependent on the suppliers, then they are creating tools and they use their powers with this command and control approach. There is no empathy, there is no relation. But at the end, what this creates is injustice. Suppliers perceive those brands and those relations as unjust transactional business relations, and there's no loyalty. But the same suppliers are working with multiple brands, and I am seeing the difference when it comes to brands' power use. Some brands are actually quite aware of their dependence on the suppliers. What does it mean? For my business, I need you. But if I don't acknowledge this, my relationship to you becomes transactional. I give you orders and I command. But if I understand that I need you, then this creates a conversation. And then it works. At that level, which is our future, we see actually just outcomes. We are seeing justice stored in this context. And loyalty is becoming a really important outcome. And believe it or not, suppliers don't want to become rich. Their dream is to be able to create an ecosystem which they want to be proud of because of their communities. In Italy, I am really proud of one thing. Manufacturers and regions, production hubs, they are actually community-based entities, communities. So they do things to actually thrive. But the system, the fashion system, is creating a structure that makes people, that forces people to survive. That difference between how we can thrive as a community is a very important question. Some brands have started realizing this, and then they build relationships with empathy. This is the future. So if we move forward, I will summarize briefly. We have to decarbonize. Net zero is real. Legislations are coming. We have to do things. But fashion cannot do those things if we don't become honest about the systemic problems that I have just pointed out. And I will skip the slide, and I will just show you this final slide before I leave the stage. But this is the past. This is yesterday. Let's consider this something that happened in the past. This is a system that we are facing in the fashion industry. Things are top-down. There is a dictatorial leadership, and it creates paradoxical tensions. And then at the end of the day, impact on the workers, impact on the suppliers are not discussed enough. Now legislations are coming. We are seeing technical solutions, which is great, but we have to realize one thing. Those solutions must be created with a long-term thinking. This is our research, and my research is based on just transition. Just transition is a theory that integrates social justice with climate action. So short-term goals and climate actions must be planned with a long-term social mentality, which is difficult, but it is not impossible. Many other industries, such as coal and mining, did this. So fashion, come on people, we can do this. And not doing this is just laziness. But these are the principles. Decision-making must be decentralized. In these platforms, I want to see representation, not just brands and top-tier suppliers, but everybody else, subcontractors, farmers, workers. If we actually mobilize those plural voices, we will hear some solutions. And actually, it will give us some actions based on real-life evidence. And if we can manage to do this, then tomorrow, future of fashion can be something like this, based on 3 principles. Governance structures that has always been so top-down must be more inclusive, and we need to create supply chain strategies based on evidence that come from real people. So that's why my pledge to all of you, let's work together, let's create conversations, but let's put empathy front and center. And if we do this, we will be able to create a new supply chain structure. We have to go beyond risk mitigation. My fear with today's legislations and everything else that is going on, I am really skeptical that people will see this as a compliance. Yes, it is a compliance, but it must go beyond risk mitigation. It must go toward value maximization. If we manage to create the previous slides that I showed you, we can actually really move beyond cost reduction and risk mitigation toward value maximization for everybody, not just for the brands. And lastly, supply chains must be people and planet-centered. So far, we don't see this happen in the fashion industry, but time is up. We have to make sure we are creating the future with the people, not on their behalf. And last but not least, this is what I see in the fashion industry: detachment, emotional and physical detachment. Brands must be in the field. Designers must speak with the farmers. Everyone must be in this conversation. If we don't do this, there's no future that will be just. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hakan, for your speech. I'm quite sure there are some questions.
Hello, Mr. Hakan. Nice to meet you. It's very pleasure, speaker. And I'm working with sustainability and innovation, researching my PhD thesis. And I'm looking for how the companies can put all the things that you said about people and planet saving, of course, but also getting the profit, the just profit, and then to maintain the company sustainable like this. I saw that you have perhaps you have some answers about this, how they measure this, how they can go forward just to balance all this, the triple bottom line.
Yes, great question. Thank you very much. And I would love to discuss more about your PhD, which
of course,
is great.
ladies.
But of course, we cannot forget the profits. It is vital, it is business. Business must make profit. The question is that profit must be established with an ecological consciousness and also well-being centered mindset. So the question is, some brands are realizing they need to really integrate societal well-being and ecological sustainability with profit. And they are trying to understand how they can actually secure their supply chains so that it will secure their business. If we don't understand this, actually the future of any company will be in jeopardy because there's no raw materials. If we talk about Kashmir, Mongolia, because of also climate change, but also because of fast fashion's cheap Kashmir obsession, we are overgrazing and we are overfarming, and animals are unfortunately dying. And that's why we have to really understand long-term survival is linked with ecological sustainability. But also, that mentality shows us communities that are dependent on that production needs us. So it creates a structure with the farmers, with the suppliers, and brands actually give resources to those communities. They secure future business. They make sure they have a profit because those products will be secured, but also they understand they are helping their supply chain communities. It is not happening everywhere, but I am seeing some brands that are understanding their future is contingent on their supply chain communities. They have started creating these conversations. But it's a really, really long journey. And the first and fundamental thing that I want you to all to take away from me is the importance of dialogues and conversations. These issues are really complex. We cannot just create one-size-fits-all easy solutions. These complex situations require complex solutions, but those solutions require dialogues and conversations. So those conversations now start taking place in some companies, but we have a long way to go. So hopefully I answered your question.
Of course, thank you.
Thank you.
We have time for another question.
And I will be around, so I will be happy to discuss further.
Hi, very short, but it's kind of contradiction. Like we talk about fast fashion, super fast fashion express, then we talk about speaking to farmers, like direct emotional contact. And this is why this is only responsibility of luxury fashion. Everybody should do that.
It is not just a responsibility for luxury fashion. The responsibility is actually the material is, as long as it is based on synthetics and polyester, we have a problem, and the problem must be tackled. And actually the question that I wanted to underline, the business conditions of fashion is making profits with cost reduction purposes. But polyester is creating ecological collapse with many health problems, such as like the cancer and all the things that we are actually breathing through clothing. So the polyester is a really big question mark that we all must tackle. But I actually give the same suggestions to fast fashion brands. Fast fashion is even much more critical because they don't go to even tier 2. Meaning fast fashion organizes everything through tier 1 direct manufacturer, and their task is to really create more transparent supply chains with visibility to be able to understand what happens in their supply chains. And then I keep receiving questions all the time, but what does it mean for the workers? It will create some job losses, etc. This is just transition, so we have to create this transformation with the manufacturers. What happens in Bangladesh today and Myanmar because of political tensions, it is a really big question mark. So brands, again, must be in the field with their suppliers, not through audits or third-party certification schemes, to really understand how they can support and help their suppliers. So it is not just luxury's responsibility, but what is interesting about luxury have resources and have the also legacy to do this, and people actually follow luxury as a big brother, and they take all the design ideas from luxury. My pledge to luxury, it is time to be different on other aspects than just runway and the designs. So that's why I give this message to luxury. They can also be, I will say, authentic with these mentality shifts, and then it will set the tone for the others that always copy and paste luxury.
And your message to fast fashion, short?
It is a really complex situation. I need to remind you one thing. Fast fashion is also, this is really controversial, but in many, many countries that fast fashion produces, governments lack regulations. So I always criticize fast fashion, but we have to be fair. In many companies, in many countries, fast fashion actually created governance structures that governments don't do. So even though I criticize them, there are some social aspects that have been improved with the existence of fast fashion. My message to them, the business model is unsustainable. We cannot shoehorn sustainability into a broken value system. Fast fashion is broken. We have to challenge the system. I keep giving these messages on LinkedIn, so you take a look at my LinkedIn and you will see. But I really appreciate the question. Fast fashion by default is unsustainable. We cannot churn out 24 collections and then promote a capsule collection based on circular materials and then pretend everything is sustainable, which is not. So we have to be honest about the business model. And my heart is broken because sustainability is a concept that we still don't understand. Even the person, John Elkington, professor, that has created triple bottom line, he confessed himself. He said, this is what I wanted to create. It has become a tool that was hijacked by the industry people. So long story short, the system is unsustainable.
Thanks.